right after I graduated college with an IT degree, I got a job at a major healthcare technology company. And I started working for this company in 2021. So right after the peak of the pandemic, and I was working remotely. So I had a company laptop, and every morning I would wake up, I would open my laptop, Microsoft Teams would open, and everyone on my team at work, anyone who wanted to check on me, my boss or manager, whoever, would see that I had a green little check mark by my user, so my status was online, and I'd be good to go. So I'd open up my laptop, I'd turn on a little program called Caffeine, which simulates like a mouse click every 30 seconds so that you never go to idle. So, as far as anyone else knew, I was hard at work. I'd open it up, go back to bed for an hour. And then I'd get up, I'd complete some tasks. My job was relatively simple. I would try and resolve support tickets for software users. And a lot of times this involved calling people, figuring out what it is they actually wanted done, because they didn't know all the technical jargon that we had. I won't get into how stupid I think all the software was and the way it was handled, but I completed a day's work in an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then the afternoon was always filled with meetings, which were generally pointless, but I had to attend them. So, living at home, I'm living with some roommates, living situation's good. I'm in the gym, I've got my health on track, and every day after work, I'm focusing hard on what I felt was my purpose at the time, which was the creation of my first album. And this had its ups and downs. And there were days where I would work, which involved a lot of pointless tasks and meetings and a general feeling of purposelessness. And I would work out. And then in the evening, here I am. I'm finally free to pursue my passion. And my roommate's home from work. We chat a little bit, we hang out. Maybe a friend comes over, we have some fun. And don't get me wrong, I love being social, but the fact is I was not grinding and just throwing myself wholeheartedly into what at the time was my purpose. We talk about purpose all the time, and the fact is, I'm not the first person to say this, you will be your happiest when you're giving your best effort towards your purpose. And if you've ever read Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, you'd know that usually, generally for most people, what that looks like is the first several hours of the day in the morning being devoted to your purpose. And this is something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of the online businessman types, and writers, people across all professions, really anyone whose work is self-directed, probably falls into this pattern naturally most of the time. Because your work, your passion, your purpose, all those wrapped into one, should be what you give your first and best efforts toward. Makes me think of the story of Cain and Abel, where God gets an offering from Abel and he's pleased. He offers God the first fruits which in this case was the best sheep of his flock. And then Cain offers some grain to God. He's a grain farmer while Abel was the shepherd. But God didn't like Cain's offering because Cain's offering was not his first fruits. Cain's offering was what he had left over, or basically it wasn't his best, first, fullest effort. I felt that same thing. I felt the disapproval and honestly, the depression of being forced to devote my most mentally alert hours and my most productive hours to something that I felt was pointless. Was I getting paid well? Absolutely. But it's deeper than money. Your satisfaction is deeper than money. I'm grateful that I learned that real early in my life. You can chase money and status of whatever job it is, but if you're not able to give your first fruits, those first few hours of the day, to something that is both intrinsically and extrinsically rewarding, God's not going to like what you've got to offer. And you're going to feel it. You're going to be in exile. I was incredibly depressed during this period of my life. And even though I did make slow progress on my album and eventually finished it, which brought me great joy, things only started to look up when I started devoting the first couple hours of my day to what would eventually become my new purpose. And as I started to do that, life really started looking up on all fronts. And eventually I quit that job and made less money for a little while, but it was so worth it in order to have my contentment and my sense of purpose back. Because when you've spent 8 hours idling or forcing out the work you have to do, and you leave the work that you should be doing, you leave your purpose for the end, it's not the same. You're giving less than your best. And it's not because you're not trying, it's because you haven't set your life up where you can give your best. It's like working out. You go in there, right after you eat a big meal, you prioritize all this other stuff. A lot of times you find it that you work out at the wrong time of day. You know what time it is for you. You're not going to get your best results because the best effort just isn't there. You don't have the energy. You're simply not able to give it your best effort. The classic demonstration for this is when you take a jar and you try and fit sand, marbles, and ping pong balls into it. The only way it works is if you put the big things, the priorities, the important things represented by the ping pong balls in first. Then the marbles, which fill in the space, and then the sand, which fills in the cracks. You do it the other way around, you're not going to be able to fit it all in. That's what I was doing, and I was depressed. What really turned it around for me was offering my first fruits, offering my best hours, my most capable self to what I was being called to do, to what my purpose was. And if you need to figure out what your purpose is, go watch a Hamza video or just try some shit. A lot of times you don't really know what it is until afterwards, when you realize, when I started doing XYZ, I really started to feel content. I really started to feel productive. I really started to feel like I was providing value. I really started to feel like I was making progress. That's a huge piece of it. So offer best effort, offer your first fruits to what you should be doing.